A poor young girl married a 73-year-old millionaire 1 week later. She was stunned by what she saw. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The afternoon sky over Los Angeles was a dull shade of gray when Clara Evans, a 24-year-old waitress, hurried down the wet sidewalk holding an envelope marked Final Notice. Her shoes were soaked, her uniform wrinkled from a double shift, but she barely felt the cold. All she could think about was her mother's hospital bill that was due in 2 days. Clara stopped under the awning of a small restaurant, catching her breath. Her phone buzzed again, another message from the landlord. If the rent is not paid by Friday, the room will be locked. Her throat tightened. She had been working 3 jobs since her father passed away, but no matter how hard she tried, it was never enough. The city was merciless, and every day felt like a battle she was slowly losing. A black car slowed to a stop beside the curb. The tinted window rolled down, revealing a man in his 70s. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his posture straight and dignified. He wore a tailored gray suit and carried an aura of quiet authority. "Miss Evans?" he asked in a calm, deep voice. Clara hesitated. "Yes?" "My name is Richard Alden," he said. "May I have a moment of your time? It concerns your mother's hospital account." Her pulse quickened. "You know my mother?" "I know the hospital's director," he replied. "I made the payment for her treatment this morning. You no longer owe them anything." Clara blinked in disbelief. "You paid for it?" "Yes," he said evenly. "And I have a proposition for you." She stared at him, rain dripping from her hair. "What kind of proposition?" He stepped out of the car, holding an umbrella above her head. "Let us go inside," he said, gesturing toward the cafe behind them. "We should not discuss this in the rain." Inside, the room was warm and quiet. Soft jazz played in the background. Clara sat across from the man who, at 73, looked more like a senator than a businessman. His watch gleamed under the low lights, and his eyes were sharp but calm. "I know what you are thinking," Richard began, his tone firm yet polite. "This is not charity. It is a contract." Clara frowned. "A contract?" He nodded slowly. "I have no family left. My late wife passed away 10 years ago, and I am surrounded by people who pretend to care only because of my money. My health is declining, and I have no one I trust to manage my estate. I need someone decent, someone untainted by greed, to stand beside me for a limited time." Her brow furrowed. "You want me to work for you?" "Not exactly," he said. "I want you to marry me." The cup slipped from her hand, clattering against the saucer. For a moment, all she could hear was the soft hum of rain outside. "Marry you?" she repeated. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," he replied quietly. "I have watched the way you treat others. I have seen you give your lunch to a homeless man outside the diner. I know your reputation for honesty. That is what I need, someone real." Clara's voice trembled. "Why me? I am no one." "That is exactly why," Richard said. "You have nothing to prove and nothing to hide. It will be a marriage on paper, an agreement. You will receive full financial security. Your debts will be cleared. Your mother's care will be guaranteed, and after 1 year you will be free to leave with a future of your own." Her heart pounded. "So this is just business?" "Yes," he said. "A contract marriage. You will not be obligated to love me or act as a wife in the personal sense. You will simply help me protect my name and my estate from those who wish to take it." Clara looked down at her trembling hands. "Why would you trust a stranger with that?" Richard leaned forward, his voice softer now. "Because sometimes, Miss Evans, a stranger can be more honest than the people you have known your entire life." Silence filled the air. Outside, thunder rumbled over the city. Clara's thoughts tangled in confusion, her mother's fragile health, the eviction notice, the endless debt. Could she really marry a man nearly 50 years older, just to survive? She looked up and met his gaze. For the first time, she saw not a millionaire, but a lonely man, one who had spent a lifetime surrounded by people who smiled, only for what they could take. I do not know if I can," she whispered. Richard gave a faint smile. "Take your time, but know this. Miss Evans' opportunities do not knock twice. Sometimes they whisper once, and if you do not listen, you may never hear them again. He rose from his seat, placed a small velvet box on the table, and left without another word. Inside was a simple gold ring and a note that read, "Think of it as a contract, but make sure it is your choice." Clara sat frozen, staring at the ring as the cafe lights reflected off the gold. Somewhere deep inside, she felt it the quiet pull of fate, a single decision that could change everything forever. The morning sun peeked through the thin curtains of Clara's small apartment, painting soft golden lines across the cracked walls. She had not slept all night. The velvet box sat on her table, the gold ring glinting in the light as if it were watching her. Every time she looked at it, her chest tightened. Her mother called from the next room, her voice weak but gentle. "Clara, sweetheart, are you awake?" "Yes, Mom," she answered softly, pushing the box away. Her mother coughed before speaking again. "The doctor said I may need another treatment soon, but please, do not worry. We will find a way." Clara forced a smile, though her heart ached. "It will be fine, Mom, I promise." After making a cup of tea for her mother, Clara sat by the bedside, trying to hide the worry on her face. The older woman noticed anyway. "What is wrong, Clara? You have that look again." Clara hesitated before answering. "There is something I need to tell you. Yesterday, a man approached me. His name is Richard Alden." Her mother's eyes widened slightly. "Richard Alden? The businessman? The one who owns Alden Enterprises?" Clara nodded. "Yes. He paid for your hospital bills." Her mother frowned in confusion. "Why would a man like that help us?" Clara's voice lowered. "Because he wants to marry me." For a moment, there was only the hum of the small heater filling the silence. Then her mother whispered, "Marry you? Clara? That is impossible." "I thought the same," Clara replied. "But he said it is not a real marriage. It is a contract, for 1 year only. He said it would help both of us. He will take care of everything, your treatments, the rent, all of it." Her mother reached out, her frail hand gripping Clara's. "My child, do not sell your life for comfort. You deserve more than an arrangement." Clara swallowed hard. "I am not doing this for comfort. I am doing it for you." Her mother's eyes softened with tears. "You have a kind heart, Clara, but sometimes kindness can become a cage." Clara said nothing. Her gaze drifted to the window, where the city shimmered under the morning light. By afternoon, she found herself standing in front of Alden Tower, a gleaming building that touched the clouds. The glass doors reflected her small figure, nervous and uncertain. Inside, the marble lobby was silent except for the echo of her footsteps. The receptionist greeted her politely and guided her to the top floor. When the elevator doors opened, she found Richard Alden waiting near a large window. He stood tall, his silver hair glowing faintly in the sunlight. "You came," he said with quiet satisfaction. Clara nodded. "I had to know if this is real." "It is very real," he replied. "Sit down, Miss Evans." She took a seat opposite him. His office was vast and orderly, filled with books, awards, and photographs of another life, a life that seemed far away from hers. Richard opened a folder on his desk and slid a document toward her. "This is the agreement," he said. "It outlines everything we discussed." Clara glanced over the pages, her fingers trembling slightly as she read the details. Every word felt heavy. Duration: 1 year. Financial support: complete. Personal boundary clause: no obligation of intimacy. Exit clause: full independence after the term ends. She looked up. "Why are you doing this?" He leaned back in his chair. "Because I am tired of being surrounded by people who see my money but not me. I do not need affection built on lies. I need companionship built on honesty, even if it has an expiration date." Clara's eyes narrowed. "You think a contract can give you that?" "It can give me peace," he said, "and perhaps it can give you a second chance." Her throat tightened. "You are 73 years old, Mr. Alden. I am 24. People will think this is wrong." Richard smiled faintly. "People always think what they want. What matters is what you and I know to be true." She stared at him for a long moment. "And if I agree, then we proceed immediately," he said calmly. "I will ensure that your mother's care continues without interruption. In return, you will attend certain public events with me, appear as my wife, and sign documents when needed. You will live here, in my home. You will not owe me anything beyond that." The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara's pulse quickened. "And what happens when the year ends?" He looked out the window, his voice quiet. Then you will walk away with everything you need. You will have a new beginning. Clara lowered her eyes to the paper. The space for her signature waited at the bottom, blank and final. Outside, the wind brushed against the glass. Inside, her heart pounded. For years, she had dreamed of a life free from struggle. But she never imagined it would come like this through a pen stroke that tied her to a man she barely knew. "I will do it," she whispered. Richard nodded once. "Then let us make it official." He stood, extending his hand. Clara rose slowly, her fingers cold as she shook his. His grip was firm, steady, and strangely reassuring. When the assistant entered with 2 identical copies of the contract, Richard signed first, his handwriting elegant and confident. Then Clara took the pen. The moment her name touched the paper, her old life felt like it slipped away. Richard reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved the same velvet box. He opened it and placed the ring on the desk. "This is only a symbol," he said, "a reminder of the agreement between us." Clara hesitated before sliding the ring onto her finger. It was slightly loose, cool against her skin. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Alden," he said softly. She looked at him, unsure whether to feel grateful or terrified. That evening, as the city lights began to flicker outside, Clara stood at the window of her tiny apartment one last time. She whispered to herself, "You wanted a chance to save her, Clara. Now you have it. Do not regret it." She took her coat, turned off the light, and stepped into the waiting black car parked below. As it drove toward the Alden estate, the world outside blurred into streaks of gold and gray. She pressed her palm against the cold window and watched her old neighborhood fade behind her. She did not know it yet, but this contract would lead her to something far greater than survival. It would lead her straight into the kind of truth that no paper could ever define. The car stopped in front of the Alden mansion just after sunset. The sky glowed deep orange, and the air smelled faintly of rain. Clara stepped out, her shoes sinking slightly into the gravel driveway. The house was even larger than she remembered. White marble columns, tall windows glowing with soft light, and an entrance so grand it made her breath catch. Richard waited at the door. His expression was calm, unreadable. "Welcome home, Mrs. Alden," he said. Clara's heart fluttered at the sound of the name. "Thank you, Mr. Alden," she replied quietly. Inside, the mansion felt like another world. The chandelier above her sparkled like crystal fire. Every surface gleamed, every piece of furniture looked untouched. It was beautiful, but it was also cold, like a museum of someone's past. A housekeeper appeared, a kind woman in her 50s with warm eyes. "Good evening, ma'am. My name is Mrs. Lang. Please allow me to show you to your room." Clara nodded, still trying to take it all in. As they walked down the long hallway, she noticed portraits of Richard's younger years, pictures with his late wife, charity events, business awards. Every frame told a story of a life far removed from hers. Mrs. Lang opened the door to a spacious bedroom overlooking the garden. "If you need anything, please ring the bell by the door. Dinner will be served at 7. When she left, Clara placed her small suitcase on the bed and sat down. The silence pressed around her. The mattress was soft, the sheets smooth, but nothing felt real. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Downstairs, the grandfather clock struck 7. Clara changed into a modest blue dress and walked to the dining room. Richard was already seated at the far end of a long table set with silverware and candles. He stood as she entered. "You look lovely," he said politely. "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They ate mostly in silence. The clinking of forks echoed through the room. Finally, Clara gathered her courage. "This house is very quiet." Richard looked up from his plate. "It has been for a long time," he said. "Silence can be peaceful when you choose it, but lonely when you do not." His words lingered in the air. For a moment, she saw something fragile behind his calm face, something human. After dinner, Richard offered to show her the library. The room smelled of old books and cedar wood. Shelves stretched to the ceiling, and a fire crackled gently in the fireplace. "This was my wife's favorite room," he said. "She loved stories. She believed every book held a secret about the person reading it." Clara ran her fingers along the spine of an old novel. "It is beautiful," she said softly. Richard nodded. "You may spend time here whenever you like. Consider it yours as well." She looked at him curiously. "You are very kind for someone who claims this marriage is only a contract." His eyes met hers. Kindness does not have to end when love is not part of the deal. The firelight flickered across his face, tracing the lines of age and time. For the first time, Clara did not see a billionaire or an employer. She saw a man who had lost something long ago and never truly found it again. Later that night, she returned to her room and stood by the window. The garden stretched out in perfect symmetry below, and the stars shimmered above the city. She touched the ring on her finger. It still felt heavy, like a promise she did not yet understand. In the distance, she saw a single light still burning in Richard's study. He was sitting at his desk, writing something by hand. Even from afar, his posture looked lonely. Clara whispered to herself, "This is not what I imagined." But deep inside, a small voice answered her, "Neither is he." She turned off the lamp and lay down, staring at the ceiling as the clock ticked softly in the hall. For the first time in years, she was not worrying about rent or bills. Yet, she had never felt more uncertain about who she was, or what she had just agreed to become. The next few days passed quietly inside the Alden mansion. The rhythm of Clara's life changed completely. Every morning she woke to the sound of birds outside the tall windows and the smell of freshly brewed coffee drifting through the hall. Mrs. Lang treated her kindly, but the staff moved with a polite distance, unsure how to act around the young woman suddenly called Mrs. Alden. Richard was courteous and precise. At breakfast, he spoke briefly about schedules and social events she would need to attend with him. "There will be a charity gala on Friday," he said, setting down his cup of tea. "You will come as my wife. Do not worry. The press will only see what we want them to see." Clara nodded. "Yes, Mr. Alden." He gave a slight smile. "You may call me Richard when we are alone. It will sound more natural." That afternoon, Mrs. Lang introduced Clara to a stylist, a calm woman named Elise who carried a rack of elegant dresses. "Mr. Alden asked me to help you prepare for the event," she said. Clara touched the fabric of a silver gown. "These are beautiful, but they look expensive." Elise smiled. "Everything in this house is expensive, dear, but you wear it with grace, not price." Over the next few days, Clara learned the manners expected at a millionaire's side. Elise taught her how to hold a champagne glass, how to greet people at formal dinners, and how to speak with quiet confidence. Sometimes she stumbled over her words or tripped on her heels, but Richard never laughed. He only watched with a hint of amusement and patience. On the evening of the gala, the mansion's driver escorted them to the event. The ballroom was filled with crystal chandeliers, the hum of music, and the soft murmur of wealthy guests. Cameras flashed as soon as Richard and Clara entered. She felt her pulse quicken, but he placed a steady hand on her arm. "Just breathe," he whispered. "You belong here tonight." Reporters whispered behind them, taking pictures of the young woman beside the aging billionaire. Clara kept her smile gentle and calm, even as her heart pounded. She stayed close to Richard, mimicking his poise and rhythm. At one point, a woman approached them, a sharp-eyed socialite in a red gown. "Richard, I see you have brought a new companion," she said with a thin smile. "Quite a surprise." Richard's tone remained composed. "Clara is my wife," he said simply. "We prefer to keep our private life private." The woman's smile faded slightly. "Of course," she murmured, retreating. When the woman was gone, Clara exhaled. "Was that necessary?" she asked quietly. Richard glanced at her. "Yes, people like her thrive on doubt. Sometimes the truth, spoken clearly, is the best armor." Later, as they danced under the golden lights, Richard guided her with practiced ease. Clara followed awkwardly at first, but soon found the rhythm. For a brief moment, surrounded by the music, it almost felt real, like she truly belonged beside him. When the song ended, applause filled the room. Richard leaned closer and said, "You did very well." She smiled faintly. "I almost forgot this was pretend." His expression softened. Sometimes the best performances are the ones closest to the truth. Back at the mansion that night, Clara removed her earrings and looked at herself in the mirror. The gown shimmered like moonlight, but her eyes revealed the confusion she tried to hide. She was grateful, yes, but also unsettled. Richard Alden was supposed to be a stranger wrapped in wealth and distance. Yet, every time he spoke with patience or smiled with quiet pride, she felt her defenses slipping. Down the hall, she heard the faint notes of piano music. Richard was playing alone in the study. The melody was slow, haunting, and filled with a sadness that words could not hold. Clara stood by the door, listening. For the first time, she realized that behind the walls of privilege, there lived a man who had forgotten how to be truly seen. and for reasons she could not explain, she wanted to be the one who saw him again. Morning after the gala, the Alden mansion buzzed quietly with the usual order. Mrs. Lang arranged flowers in the foyer, and the housekeeper dusted the marble stairs. Yet for Clara, the silence felt different, now softer somehow. She found Richard in the library, sitting near the window with a cup of tea and a book. The sunlight caught the silver in his hair. He looked peaceful, almost younger. "Good morning, Richard," she said gently. He looked up with a small smile. "Good morning, Clara. You handled yourself very well last night. I was proud to have you by my side." The words surprised her more than she expected. "Thank you. I was terrified the entire time." Fear," he said, setting his cup down, "is a sign that you are doing something worth the effort. Confidence comes later." Clara smiled faintly. "You make everything sound like a lesson." "Perhaps it is," he said. "Life has a strange way of teaching when we least expect it." Over the next week, Clara noticed changes, small but steady. The staff began treating her with quiet respect instead of hesitation. The newspapers printed kind words about the unexpected but elegant Mrs. Alden. Richard included her in meetings, introducing her as his wife without hesitation. Each time he said her name in public, something stirred inside her, a warmth she tried to ignore. One afternoon, a storm rolled over the city. The wind rattled the windows, and thunder echoed in the distance. Clara stood in the hallway, watching the rain fall over the gardens. Richard joined her, holding 2 cups of tea. "I never liked storms," she said softly. "When I was a child, my father would tell me thunder was angels moving furniture." Richard chuckled quietly. "My father used to say it was the sound of heaven reminding us we are still alive." They stood together, listening to the rain. It was strange, she thought, how comfortable the silence had become between them. It no longer felt cold, it felt familiar. When the storm faded, Clara turned to him. "Richard, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why me? Truly, you could have chosen anyone for this arrangement." He was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Because you reminded me of who I used to be," he said finally. "Before money complicated everything, before loneliness became habit." Clara's chest tightened. "You are not lonely now," she said softly. Richard looked at her, his eyes steady. "Aren't I?" The question hung between them like a fragile thread. She could not find an answer. That night, as she lay in bed, Clara thought about the man in the library, the one the world called powerful but who spoke like someone quietly broken. She remembered his hand on hers at the gala, his calm voice during the storm. For the first time, the contract that bound them felt less like an agreement and more like a fragile bridge, one that neither of them had meant to cross. But somehow both had begun walking across together. And deep down, Clara knew that something was changing, something real, something dangerous. The line between what was written on paper and what was written in their hearts was slowly starting to blur. Spring arrived quietly, painting the Alden estate in soft shades of green. The air carried the scent of jasmine and rain-soaked earth. Clara had been living in the mansion for almost 3 months now, and what once felt like a gilded cage had become something strangely peaceful. Every morning, she joined Richard for breakfast in the sunroom. He read the newspaper while she tended to the small potted flowers near the window. They spoke about simple things, the weather, the garden, the news, but underneath every word was an ease that had not been there before. One morning, Richard looked up from his paper. "Clara," he said, "the Charity Foundation needs a new public face. Someone people trust. Would you consider representing it?" Clara blinked in surprise. "Me? I would not even know where to begin." He smiled faintly. "Begin with sincerity. You have that. The rest will follow." She hesitated, but his confidence gave her courage. 2 weeks later, Clara stood before a crowd at a small community center, delivering her first speech. Her hands shook, but when she glanced at Richard in the audience, his steady expression calmed her. She spoke about second chances, about how generosity could rebuild lives. The applause that followed felt unreal, yet honest. That evening, as they drove home, Clara looked out the window and said quietly, "You should have been the one giving that speech." Richard smiled. "I have spent years talking about numbers and deals. You reminded me that words can still touch hearts." She looked at him then, realizing just how much he had changed in her eyes. The cold businessman she met months ago now seemed almost gentle. Days turned into weeks, and Clara began helping Richard more often, organizing events, reviewing letters from families supported by the foundation, visiting schools in his name. Wherever she went, people admired her kindness. Yet she never forgot the truth. She was not his wife by love, but by agreement. One late afternoon, as she walked through the garden, Richard joined her. The setting sun cast a golden glow across the rose bushes. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "For what?" she asked. "For reminding me what purpose feels like," he replied. "I had forgotten." Clara's heart ached at his sincerity. "You do not have to thank me, Richard. You gave me this chance." He studied her face for a long moment. "Maybe we both needed saving," he said quietly. They stood in silence, the breeze stirring the petals around them. It was then that Clara realized she no longer felt like a guest or an employee. She felt like a part of his world. That night, she could not sleep. She sat by the window, the moonlight falling over the contract on her dresser. It looked small now, insignificant. The paper that once defined their relationship suddenly felt meaningless compared to the emotions neither of them dared to name. Somewhere in the quiet mansion, Richard was awake too, staring at the same moon through his study window. And though neither of them said a word, both knew that something had changed forever. The calm that had settled over the Alden mansion did not last long. Rumors began to spread quiet at first, then louder with every passing day. The newspapers that once praised Clara now printed questions. Who is Mrs. Alden, really? Is this marriage just another business deal? Clara noticed the shift immediately. Strangers whispered at events, and reporters lingered outside the gates. Even the staff grew cautious again, their smiles polite but distant. One morning, as she poured Richard's tea, she asked softly, "Did you see today's paper?" He nodded without looking up. "I did. I have dealt with worse. But they are saying awful things about you and about me." Richard's voice was steady. "The truth rarely sells, Clara. Lies always travel faster." Still, she could see the tension behind his calm expression. His health had begun to show its limits. Long hours at the office, missed meals, and the faint tremor in his hands. When she mentioned calling the doctor, he brushed it off. "I am fine. Do not worry about me." But worry was all she did. One afternoon, while she was arranging flowers in the library, the front door slammed open. A tall man in his 40s stormed in sharp suit, cold eyes. "Richard," the man said, his tone cutting. "So it is true. You married the waitress." Clara froze. Richard stood from his chair, his jaw tightening. "Thomas," he said evenly, "you do not belong here." Thomas Alden, Richard's estranged nephew, ignored him. "You have lost your mind. Do you know what the board is saying? They think you are unfit to manage your company. They think she manipulated you." Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling. "That is not true. I never—" Thomas cut her off with a bitter laugh. "Save your act, Miss Evans. Everyone knows this is a scam." Richard's voice deepened. "You will not speak to my wife that way." "Your wife?" Thomas sneered. "You mean your contract?" The words hit Clara like a slap. The color drained from her face. "You knew?" she whispered. Richard looked at her, his calm finally breaking. "Clara, listen." But she was already stepping back. "You told him about the contract?" "I had to," Richard said, pain in his voice. "He is on the board. I needed to protect you from legal trouble." Clara's hands shook. "You said this would stay between us. You promised." Thomas smirked. "Promises from a dying man mean very little, Miss Evans." "Enough," Richard's voice thundered through the room. "Get out of my house." Thomas turned to leave but paused at the door. "Do what you want, Uncle. But when the truth comes out, do not expect anyone to believe that girl cares about you." When he was gone, silence filled the hall. Clara's chest felt heavy, her eyes burning with tears. Richard tried to speak, but she shook her head. "Do not. Not right now." She turned and walked away before he could stop her. Upstairs, she shut her bedroom door and leaned against it, trying to breathe. For the first time since she had stepped into the mansion, it no longer felt like a home. Downstairs, Richard stood alone in the fading light, the echo of his nephew's words cutting deeper than he wanted to admit. For a man who had built his life on control, he was suddenly powerless to stop the one thing he feared most, losing her. Clara left her room before dawn the next day. The house was quiet, wrapped in gray morning light. She moved through the hallway like a ghost, carrying a small bag and the ring Richard had given her. Her heart was heavy, but her decision was clear. She could not stay where love and duty had become blurred lines. Downstairs, Mrs. Lang met her at the door, concern in her eyes. Mrs. Alden, are you sure about this? Clara managed a faint smile. Please, just tell him I am grateful for everything. But I cannot be part of something that hurts him. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. A taxi waited by the gate. As it drove away, Clara looked back once. The mansion stood tall against the pale sky, silent and distant, like the life she was leaving behind. When Richard woke, the emptiness in the house felt immediate. Her chair at the breakfast table was empty, her favorite scarf gone from the foyer. On his desk lay the ring in its velvet box, beside a folded letter written in her careful handwriting. You gave me more than a home, Richard. You gave me peace. But I cannot let the world use my name to hurt yours. You once said honesty is the only thing that matters. So here is mine. I care for you more than I ever expected to. That is why I must go. Please do not look for me. Richard read the words over and over, his vision blurring. For a long time he sat motionless, the silence pressing around him. Then, with effort, he rose, took the ring in his hand, and closed it tightly. Later that day, the news broke. Mrs. Alden leaves billionaire husband amid scandal. Cameras gathered at the gates, hungry for gossip, but Richard did not appear. Instead, he called a press conference at the Alden Foundation. Reporters filled the room, expecting denial or outrage. Instead, Richard stood before them, pale but steady, and said, "Everything you have heard about my marriage is true except one thing. It was never a lie. Clara Evans showed me more honesty in 1 year than most people show in a lifetime. I am proud to call her my wife." The room fell silent. Cameras flashed, but Richard's voice did not waver. This began as a contract. It ended as truth. And for the first time, he spoke her name not as an arrangement, but as a confession. 3 months passed after the press conference. The story faded from headlines, replaced by new scandals and new names. The world moved on, but for Richard, the mansion remained quiet. Every morning, he still set 2 cups on the table, though only one was ever used. Every evening, he walked the garden alone, where her laughter once echoed softly among the roses. One afternoon, while reviewing letters for the foundation, Mrs. Lang entered his study. "Sir," she said gently, "this came in the mail today. No return address." Richard looked up, his hands trembling slightly as he opened the envelope. Inside was a short letter written in familiar handwriting. "Dear Richard, I saw your speech. You should not have defended me, but you did. I am still working, quietly, at a small community shelter. I am trying to live the way you taught me with grace and purpose. Please take care of yourself. The world still needs your kindness. Clara." Hell, Richard read the note several times, a faint smile forming beneath tired eyes. He folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the velvet ring box that had never left his desk. Weeks later, the foundation held a charity event at the same hall where they had first appeared together. Richard attended, slower now but still dignified. As he stepped off the stage after his speech, he heard a soft, familiar voice behind him. "Your words were beautiful," Clara said. He turned, almost not believing it. She stood there, wearing a simple dress, her smile gentle and real. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said, "I thought you would not come back." "I thought so too," she replied. "But I realized something. A contract may end, but promises made with heart do not." Richard reached into his pocket and opened the velvet box. The same gold ring rested inside. "Then perhaps we should begin again," he said quietly. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "Yes, but this time, no contract." He smiled and slipped the ring onto her finger once more. Around them, applause began, soft at first, then growing stronger. The camera lights captured their hands together, the ring shining under the warm glow. The story that had started as a deal ended with truth, forgiveness, and a love that no paper could ever define.